Violence mars a pre-election May Day demonstration in Paris as crowds vent their anger and people stand divided. All of this for Sunday's final presidential vote. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair says he plans to get his hands dirty in a political comeback, but much of the British public still believes those hands are already dirty enough.
He's a war criminal.
Should definitely not get back into politics.
No, it's not a good thing. He's had his time.
And it is the third anniversary of the Odessa tragedy in Ukraine, when almost 50 people were killed when a building packed with anti-Kiev activists was set on fire. Despite lengthy investigations, no one has ever been held responsible. The Tuesday Worldwide News Headlines live here on RT International. Thanks for joining us. Molotov cocktails, stones and tear gas accompanied a May Day demonstration in Paris, which left 6 police officers injured. And what started as a peaceful rally soon descended into violence. Now, France remains deeply divided over its presidential election, which will witness the final round this Sunday.
Thousands of people came out to the streets for the annual May Day protests, many of them to have their voices heard about things like social rights. But it wasn't long before that rally was hijacked, and this is what happened. Some of the protesters rampaged through the city, smashing windows on their way, like this. Advertising space like this was smashed up too as the protesters ran through the streets. The crowd even ripped down this traffic light in the Bastille, which is now being repaired. And because they turned so violent, the police responded with tear gas, trying to disperse the crowds. But the crowds regrouped again and decided to attack people such as journalists, saying we couldn't film their faces. As France races towards its presidential election, the battle rages on, not just between the two candidates, but also here on the streets. Charlotte Dubinsky, RT, Paris.
The violence came as the two candidates, the pro-EU centrist Emmanuel Macron and the National Front's Marine Le Pen, held their own rallies and gave interviews to try and grab support ahead of this decisive vote. But while fireworks were flying on the streets of Paris, the candidates also threw some of their own.
Today, the National Front is where it is because it's exploiting the anger of our fellow citizens, but without bringing any response.
It's the people who are the victims of the politics led by Mr. Macron, while he was for 5 years at Hollande's side, a politics which pits everyone against everyone.
The National Front hasn't changed. It brings hatred and division to the country. The methods they're using are the methods I'm fighting.
In this election, the system is imposing its candidate on you. François Hollande is imposing on you his protégé. And here you have Fillon's new best friend, who he once called Emmanuel Hollande. We can see Hollande leaving through the door and then climbing back through the window.
Lawyer Hosni Mati believes many people are not happy with either of the final candidates or what they represent.
They think that they have to choose between consequences and causes. The causes of the raising of the National Front of the far-right Marine Le Pen, and the one who is seen by the demonstrator and the rioters as the one who is the causes of this situation, who is Emmanuel Macron. So we are in a situation or, well, we have to choose between now or later. Will we have Marine Le Pen now, or will we have Marine Le Pen later? Because a lot of voters, French voters, are thinking that the raising of the National Front is the result of the neoliberal policy of Emmanuel Macron.
However, France not the only country which saw its May Day celebrations turning violent. Let's show you pictures from a number of cities around the world which also became flashpoints. Meanwhile, the German capital also witnessed fierce clashes, despite an extra 5,000 officers being deployed. In the mix, RT's Nadira Tudor.
We've seen violent clashes between protesters and police intermittently, and how I can describe this is that there were waves of the crowds trying to get away from the violence when it erupted, and then they would reform. We saw bottles being smashed. I aimed at the police. We saw pepper spray and a number of arrests, of course, and injuries. These violent clashes erupted despite the fact that huge numbers of police officers were in fact deployed to Berlin. I managed to talk to a policeman earlier about worries about terror, especially when we go back to the 19th of December and we had that awful truck terror attack. And he did confirm that there were special measures that had been taken place. So large trucks, for example, can no longer drive on a public holiday. The small trucks were not allowed to drive here in the vicinity of the May Day festival and protests. If you're a private vehicle owner, you were forced to slow down, and escape routes